All right, so welcome back to Vortex Garage, and we're moving forward with our Spitfire. So what we're going to be working on today is getting our outer rocker panel on this side welded on. And as you can see, we're in the mock-up stage because we've got to fit this part right here. This is the filler piece that goes in the front. Now I went ahead and mocked up this outer rocker panel, just kind of rough mock-up, so I can get an idea of where this exactly needs to sit and how it needs to be modified to fit like the original. Now, I decided to go ahead and use this new piece because I forgot that I had ordered it many months ago when I got some of the sheet metal here. It's a pretty inexpensive part, and I think I just added it to the cart as I was going along because the front ones were a little weak feeling, and well, for the price, it was nice to have new ones. So I did notice there's a slight bit of difference here, mainly in that there's a little bit of a ridge here, which I didn't see on the originals based on how they were mounted. But it probably makes sense to move over and use that camera to show you a little bit of a close-up view. All right, so here's kind of what I'm talking about, is that when this fits on, this edge piece right here didn't seem to be present on the other one. And as you can see, there's not really an area where this ridge would fit into. So what we're probably going to end up doing is cutting away this ridge and welding it. We'll spot weld it to this flange, and then it also had a little bit of weld along the edge. And then it looks like they pretty much used a lot of seam sealer after that. I realize I'm probably not on any cameras as I'm saying this, but so what we're going to do is kind of show you how we're going to mock this piece up. So what I'm going to do, this piece actually fits inside of here. All right, and we already got a little bit of an issue in that our flange right here needs to go in a little bit, at least temporarily. This should allow us to slip it behind here. There we go, that's much better. So kind of one of the reasons we're doing this is we want to get an idea of where the rocker is going to fit versus this piece, so we can mark out an outline of where we want to weld this piece so that we can have our rocker panel fit appropriately and have enough flange here to weld. So it's going to be a little bit of fiddling. Well, essentially like that. And down a little bit. So really, I think we're looking at about like that. So I'm going to mark that's our approximate location. It looks like in the bottom here, we're going to want to come in a little bit. We're hitting something. It looks like we're at the bottom here, so this flange would need to come out and this one in a little bit to sandwich those in. So pretty simple. So that should do it for us. So this should give us kind of a rough idea of about the line where this is going to mount. And that one I couldn't get all the way in with the marker, so I'm going to go down this a little bit. So our piece will come here, so we'll be able to spot weld to this flange, which means we can use our hole punch and punch a, all right, I got to look over here. We can use our hole punch and punch a few holes in. And then on this piece right here, we'll be able to do the same. And then we'll be able to put a couple tacks along the edge there. But this shows where we can go ahead and cut that little flange piece off or just grind it down and then have a nice smooth transition here. Now I want to show you on the smaller camera, not smaller camera, they're both the same size, but the camera that's zoomed in more, I want to show you some interesting things. Let me remove the outer rocker now that we don't need it mocked up anymore, and you'll be able to see what we're talking about. So as you can see up here, we've ground away a lot of material, and we had a lot of pieces from the old flange and our outer rocker that had to be kind of cut and removed to get us down to the base metal on the firewall. But I just find it very interesting. Again, no signs that this car was in an accident here, but look at how just crunched and munched this stock piece is. and it was just full of seam sealer in between the panels. So it's kind of funny to see that, and I'm not sure if we're going to do too much to clean this up. We might just sort of try to match the factory a little bit here. We'll have to take a look and see what we want to do, but we'll be able to go ahead and get our new piece on here. But it's just funny to see this mess right here that is appears to be from the factory, and it's matched on the other side on this car as well. So like I said, we're going to move forward and go ahead and get our piece fit up, but I just wanted to show you just sort of what we see from the factory there. All right, now that we've got our panel prepped, we're going to go ahead and get it tacked to the edge, try to get it lined up, clamp everything down as we go along, including our flange here, and work on getting this tacked in. I hope that these are deep enough to get into our flange. Oh, they're just not quite. They are so close, but not quite there. So unfortunately, these are the deepest C-clamp pliers that I have. I'm going to see if any of my actual C-clamps are deeper. All right, that one's pretty good. And I think we're pretty good in terms of our alignment. All right, so we've got our filler piece pretty much welded on to where we're happy. We'll still probably do a little bit of cleanup welds along the edge, and then of course, it'll probably need some sort of seam sealer like it had from the factory. But one of the main things I wanted to do was just sort of get this affixed and in a spot that I was comfortable with so that we could move on and go ahead and get our outer rocker on. The good news is all the areas that we need to weld and need to do the finish welds on can be done with the outer rocker installed. So I want to go ahead and move on and start with mock-up, and we're going to kind of show you what we're doing for that. All right, so for mock-up of our outer rocker, what we're going to do, like we've done with every other panel, we're going to get it mounted up here. We're going to see if and where we have fitment issues, and we're going to come up with a game plan on where we want to make spot weld holes and where we're going to remove any E-coating. So when putting this on, the biggest thing you want to do is note that there's a notch right here. This notch corresponds with this seam right here on the body. And you can also see some of where the original spot welds were, that basically this flange goes above this piece right here, and will actually ride up here a little bit. So that'll kind of help you with your fitment. Let's go ahead and just lightly mock it up. I guess the only other thing, obviously in the back, you have this seam right here that you can kind of line up to. And one of the things I want to point out, since we cut away a lot of our piece here, you can kind of see the curve on the back of our quarter panel, and then the curve up here is a little different. You know, remember, we pulled this piece out quite a bit. We've sort of moved it around, so there's probably a little bit of shaping that has to be done. Also, along the edge here, the rocker panel, the outer rocker, was actually welded along to this seam here. So not just spot welds. Remember when we removed it, we actually had to cut away a little bit of weld that was done between the seams there. So that's something you got to take into consideration. You might have a little bit of leftover metal or weld to grind down to get this seam smooth. So we're going to probably have to metal work this a little bit because we've got a little bit of deformation here, but we can go ahead and mock this up. So again, we're going to butt this up here, and then up this side, we'll go ahead and get it. Well, we'll probably start on this side first, get our new panel in there, up in, and then mount it on like that. So there we go, it's fitted up. But as you can see, we're going to need to work through a few fitment issues. So let me turn, we'll start in the back here with this camera. As you can see, we've got a little bit of difference here. One of the big things that I'm seeing right off the bat is that our flange is actually lower than the flange here. And that's not really anything that we've done because we didn't build these flanges. The only flange I built was this one right here. These are the inner rocker and the floor pans, and those are all put in and, excuse me, those are all put in and measured and looking pretty good. So obviously this is sitting a little low. So what I did notice was this piece can flex a little bit. So what we'll probably need to do is compare the other side and compare the radius, and we can actually kind of tighten in this radius pretty easily. And as you can see, that's going to get our flange to kind of mount and be pretty close. The biggest thing here is, again, I need to make sure that I match this seam up, and this piece is factory, so I can kind of use this as a reference. The only thing with this might not be as much of a reference because I have pulled this radius out. So this radius, as you can see, is the same deal. It's sitting lower than the flange because it's been pulled down. So we'll tighten these up, match this radius a little closer, and then we should be good. Now, worst case scenario, we can always add some flange material down here if we have to. One of the things I'm already noticing, though, is we do have a little bit of material up here, and that sort of changes as we go along. So as we fit it, and again, as you can kind of move these pieces, this piece, it will pull out, it'll push in, it'll manipulate how you need it to get that fit perfect. So you're just going to have to fiddle around with it. You're just going to have to mess with it. Our fit up here looks pretty good. Our flange is pretty much perfect. We can actually pull it back a little bit, so we're going to want to make sure it's tight. And then if we come up to the front here, we can see that our filler piece here is looking really good. I pulled this out a little bit just to clear here because I did do a test mock-up before. And what I'll do is I'll come through here and kind of hammer that down. So how are we going to do our welds on this? And what kind of E-coat removal are we going to do? So I think pretty clearly on this, anywhere we have a flange, we're going to go ahead and use our punch tool. And we're going to do spot welds through the flanges. So that'll mean along the bottom edge, along the top edge here, and then of course along here, we'll go ahead and do spot welds. And that'll pretty much get our panel affixed. The only other welds we're going to do on top of that is you could do a little bit of weld up here. I know from the factory there was a little bit holding this notch in. I don't know if we're going to necessarily have to do that, but you could zing a little weld there. Also from the factory, they had kind of had a little bit of weld here. Not to mention, it would be good to kind of fill in this piece a little bit with some weld and come back here, and eventually we'll body work it and it'll look pretty darn nice. Along the back, same thing they did from the factory. You've pretty much got this whole seam that's not going to have anything on it, so it wouldn't be a bad idea to tack it in a few places and go ahead and put some weld, and then you can either have the seam in it or you can seam weld it and make that seam disappear later on. The big question is do we want to leave this open? I think we're not going to weld this in the back here, and I may even stop my spots a little bit back here because I don't know if we're going to remove this entire piece. This piece we're not going to remove. We've got, for our quarter panel, spot welds along this seam right here, so it's possible that this piece will come out one day. I hope you can see that on camera. I got to check. Hey, you can. Cool. So can't wait to be using my new camera where I have the screen you can flip up and I can see what's in frame. But anyway, if I do remove this quarter panel, at minimum, I'm probably going to remove this bottom section. So I want to be able to slide this piece out. I don't want to be welding this in and have to worry about cutting it later. So that's pretty much it. Really, the rest of this is going to be kind of what you've seen us do before. A lot of test fitting, a lot of mock-up, a lot of tweaking and getting it to fit right. And we're going to go ahead and remove E-coating. We're going to punch holes in it, and we'll come back here and start tacking it in, check our fit, and if we're happy with it, we'll go ahead and finish welding it. And if we do that, aside from this cap filler piece, which is a pretty easy piece to put in, this entire side is going to be done. And I don't think we're going to put that piece on today anyway. That'll be probably one of the last pieces we put on, because one of the things we'll be able to do is we can even come back in here with some of the, Eastwood's got a inner frame rail kind of protectant thing. So it's got like a hose on the aerosol can. We can come in here and put a whole nother coat of rust preventative inside this. The whole idea is this thing will probably never rust again, which is awesome. But let's go ahead and work on getting this thing prepped, work on getting it mocked and fit in. and press ahead. So one more quick anecdote here. The only thing that I would say that with the spot welds, you want to get your spot welds nice and tight. Anywhere you're along here, it's fairly easy. On the flanges here, you can use the locking pliers. That'll be no problem. But when it comes to this piece up here and our piece right here, it's going to be a lot harder to get locking pliers on that to kind of push the panels together for your spot welds. So what you can do is go ahead and use your clecos for that. So we might drill through, use clecos to pull the panels together. Definitely on this, we'll probably, after we put our holes in, we'll go ahead and selectively drill. So basically what I'll probably do is punch the holes, decide which ones I want to put clecos in, mark them when I'm in mock-up, take the panel off, and so I don't bend and mangle this, go ahead and drill through them while it's on the body. And then I can use clecos to sandwich these panels together. Up here on this piece, that sort of is a good question. Will I use clecos? Probably. I think, as I did go, let me show you. You might have seen, oh, they're right here. Awesome. I was at Tractor Supply yesterday buying some dog food, and look at this. They had this in the section. They had a 3-pack of these locking pliers, and these might be big enough to actually come in here a little bit at least and close on that and get in there. So I'm hitting something. I'm actually in the support piece. So if I can get past the support piece, well, if I open them up more, I might be able to. But with big set of locking pliers like this, you might actually be able to get a little bit of a reach and get in about halfway and be able to cinch those panels together. But that's one thing when you're doing the spot welds is pretty important to be able to do, is go ahead and get those panels sandwiched. That way you're getting a really nice tight fit for that spot weld. And well, I think that's about all I can think of that I can talk about on the video. I think the rest of what we'll do will be going ahead and knocking this out, getting it in. So one thing to consider when you're grinding down some of these flanges is, although we're not putting the cap on right away, once this is fit in, if you need to grind off any E-coating, obviously it's going to be hard to get behind things. You might want to go ahead and grind away some of what you need if you're going to be doing some molding there. On this particular case, if we leave the E-coating here, we're going to be probably spot welding on the other side, so I think we're okay. But it's still something you want to keep in mind as you're going along. While you have access, figure out all the stuff that you're going to want to take off for later.
So now that we've got our E-coat ground off, we can do yet another round of mock-up fitting. That's one thing you're going to see as we go through this, is it's just a plain fact. You got to mock it up multiple times if you want to get it perfect. There's no point in cutting a weld on something just to find out that it's crooked, that it isn't on right, and that you got to spend time cutting metal away or cutting welds just to put it back. So spend the time here, do the mock-ups, play with it, get the panel gaps right, get everything set the way you want it. Don't worry if you got to do it 5 or 6 times. That's pretty much what we did here, and that's kind of what you're going to see. Of course, we sped it up so it's a little easier to watch. It does get a little boring watching us put locking pliers on these panels over and over and over again. As you can see, we put them on, and next thing you know, we're taking them off because we find little bits of tweaks here and there that we want to do. We kind of figure out where we want to do things. One of the big things that we found we had to tweak on this car was kind of straightening out some of where we had pulled the original panels off. And it's not until you really start mocking up the new piece that you really find all the little things that need to be straightened, tweaked, put curves back in, radiuses, etc. Okay, back on for another mock-up, another fit. That little corner piece that we worked on was looking a lot better with that try. Well, maybe not perfect. So as we had mentioned earlier, we wanted to drill through a couple pieces where we weren't going to necessarily have spot welds exactly where, from panel to panel, and where we needed clecos to kind of hold things together. So we're using our marker to mark up those areas on that little patch panel, the little filler piece. Then of course we're using a punch tool to make some drill marks so that we can drill them up on the upper piece of the body there. That way, once we drill the holes, we can use clecos to really pull those panels together nice and tight for welding. Couple quick hits with the drill and we'll have all the holes we need to get this panel reinstalled. I'm losing track. I don't know if this is another mock-up or the final piece. I'm not really sure. We're at least putting it back on and taking a look. We'll see. So we found that pushing up on the bottom of the panel and then securing it with locking pliers actually really helped get that radius we wanted, making it match up perfectly and getting that flange on the bottom really, really nice. I definitely feel like we're in the last mock-up here. Yep, clecos are going in, and we sped it up to make it a little less boring. Like I said, when we do video here, we have hours and hours of stuff to go through. Not a complaint, just a fact of life. That's what happens when you got to keep mocking it up, tweaking things. Even still, we're doing a little bit of tweaks here and there, as you can see in the footage. It goes back to what we said earlier. It's best to get everything to where you're happy before you start securing it with a weld. Ooh, ground cable. That means the weld's coming. Maybe next time I weld, I can do some of those really cool slow motion shots where the sparks fly everywhere. That's definitely what you see on TV nowadays. Instead, it's just old me putting some tack welds in and some spot welds. And, well, that gets boring when you do it over and over. But same thing goes as you always hear. Jump around on the panel. Don't do too much at once. Don't want to have any warping problems. And we'll do a couple more welds, and then we'll get in with some more talking.
All right, so we've got a couple days of footage. We're going to go ahead and wrap it up so we can go ahead and upload this and give you an update on YouTube. So let's catch you up on where we are. So lots of progress, as you can see. We've pretty much finished welding our outer rocker on, and we've included the new piece here, and we have that welded on. So everything's looking pretty good. The only stuff that's really outstanding here is the cap piece that goes here, which we're not going to put on just yet because I want to be able to come back in here and just put a little bit of extra rust preventative inside this piece. Now that it's welded on, we'll use the spray that you can spray inside there. Probably don't really have to do that, but this is such an easy piece, we're going to go ahead and wait and do that. Everything looks really good on it. It lined up pretty easy. As you probably saw, hopefully in the videos, we used a lot of clecos and locking pliers to kind of get this set up, kind of use this line as an example. And then we kind of pushed this up to the pinch weld and got it clamped down. And then once we got a few spot welds, we were able to kind of go through with our spot weld pliers, go ahead and get everything plug welded, spot welded in with the MIG, and came out pretty good. So we've still got a lot of grinding to do. We've got to grind all these spot welds down and then go ahead and put some primer on this just to protect it until we get to the bodywork stage on this piece. Now, we're almost done with this left-hand side of the car, aside from, of course, the rocker back here. That's another story. I mean the floor piece, because we need to do the other side. But there's a couple things that are not quite done that we're probably going to wait for, and then a few things we are going to wrap up that probably just won't be in this video. So first off, the floor support piece, which let me go grab. Got a couple pieces I didn't stage for the chat here. So first off was this cap piece, which will go right there. We actually saved the originals from the car, but these new ones, for these reproductions, are really high quality. They fit really nice, and they're actually pretty inexpensive. So I had gone ahead and picked them up since I was ordering a bunch of other stuff. This is the piece I'm talking about. Ours were pretty rusty, and we probably could have remade them, but I went ahead and got the reproductions. And they do fit in here pretty well. I've gone ahead and mocked it in just by setting it in, and everything seems to line up perfectly, and that's awesome. But what I'm a little leery of is I don't want to take the effort of kind of burning this in and getting it fully welded in and finding out. So you basically have to drill holes in the floor to match where these body mounts go, where it actually mounts to the frame. So I really want to be able to line it up, put it on the frame, and just make sure that, you know, I'm not a quarter inch off, or, well, not a quarter inch, that's a lot. I mean, I'm talking 1/16 or 1/8 off. I really want to make sure that I can validate that where I'm going to drill is the right spot. I could probably put a little bit bigger holes there or whatever, but no, I really just want to wait. I think that at this stage with this piece, I'm looking at it, it looks like it's going to fit perfectly, and it's going to be real easy to weld in when the rest of the car is done. I'm going to hold off on this until I can actually mock test fit this to our frame and sort of double check that everything's good. And one of the fears, right, is that, you know, you put everything in here. What if you're just slightly off on your measurements here? You might want to adjust where this sits. You don't want to use the other one for pure reference. You really want to use the frame for reference. So frame of reference, right? Is that a pun? I don't know. But anyway, I'm pretty confident it's going to go in no problem, but at the same time, I don't want to get myself into a jam. I'm going to hold off on this piece. So for now, it's just kind of sitting in there waiting. A couple more pieces we've been working on. So this, let me grab the whole thing. So this is the floor bracket that goes up under here. And this is the back side that you wouldn't see. This would be up under the car. So it would actually mount kind of like that up behind here. And you can see on the floor where it would go. I might have had that backwards, but at any rate, you can actually see on the floor exactly how it would mount. And reason I'm holding it like this, I've got some of that Eastwood, what do you call it? It's platinum, it's the rust preventative coating. And that's on the back side in here, and I'm going to let that cure fully overnight. And then I'm going to go ahead and grind away a little bit where the spot welds will be. But this piece, you'll see some pictures in the video. You saw how rusty it was when I didn't clean that up. So we're just letting that dry. When I had originally removed that, I had just cut it out of the old floor and had this section of old floor still spot welded to it. So on the bench, we drilled out the spot welds, popped this old piece off. So another piece of rusty metal we don't need. I've got another one that's a little bit more difficult than that. This is the floor support that goes in the back. Okay, so this goes back here and mounts against the cross piece and the floor. Well, the issue on this one is this backing piece looks very simple, okay? It looks like you got the bracket, which is kind of thick stamped piece, and then you just have, it's a square piece that's got a 90-degree bend in it. That's real easy to make, and it's 18 gauge, it looks like, but actually it looks a little thicker. It might even be 16, but at any rate, flip it around and you can see it's actually got some really deep beads in it. So not only is this piece in the front structural, but the beads and the thickness of this metal actually make this slightly structural as well. So I can't just cut this front bracket off, make a piece and weld it on. I mean, I could put beads in it, but these are really deep beads. I don't know if I can go that deep on them. I probably could. I could probably remake this. But that's the decision factor, and I haven't quite made up my mind yet. And the reason is the water had pooled on this car inside and rusted it from the inside out. So it had a lot of water collecting, and it's very pitted and rusty on the bottom here. The top is fine, the bottom is pretty well chewed up. Plus you got this bolt that's welded to this piece, so you have to factor that in. And then this is all welded in, and even this bracket's a little bit nasty on the bottom, but it's not as bad as the bottom metal here. This is probably salvageable as it is, but honestly, I think the other side, I'm looking at the other side now, it's about as bad, maybe a tiny bit worse. So I'm gonna need to figure out what to do. Another part of the issue is that these bolt holes where the trailing arm bolts to and goes through, they're kind of like pushed through and almost riveted, it looks like here. I know it's a little hard to see. I'll try to take some pictures and upload it in the video. So I need to figure out how these two pieces are assembled and disassemble them and then remake this back piece and then use this bracket. Now I need to go back online and see, I believe you can buy this. I believe this is remade. However, I want to say when I look, this is like a $200 part, right? So this isn't exactly cheap. And hey, we got tools to make this kind of stuff. So it would be harder to make this, but it's probably fairly easy to make this. And we do have a bead roller. And honestly, these beads aren't that deep. They're only about 1/4, 3/8 of an inch deep. We should be able to remake this piece. We can cut out this nut, weld it back in. This is probably a BSW, so not something we could just redo. We can go ahead and cut this away back here. I can probably do is just cut it out, leave it here, and then on the new piece, drill a bigger hole to fit over that, and then just weld it together, grind it down smooth, and you'd never know that it was repaired. Plus it sits in the back and you wouldn't see it. But so long as we get the alignment right with the holes on the body there, we'll have no problem. So we're gonna need a little more time to remake this piece. And again, that's the small stuff that you gotta do. I think I'm running out of time on the camera, and honestly, I think we're at a stage where we're ready to go ahead and get the video uploaded. So again, hopefully I took video of everything, but you saw when we went ahead and did the inner sill, we went ahead and did the inner rocker and got that in, and then finally the outer rocker, and of course this front support, this front cover piece that goes in there. But we're gonna do all the grinding of the spot welds here. I'm not sure if we'll capture that on video because you've seen tons of that before. And by the way, as I always say, go check us out on Instagram at Vortex Garage. Always pictures of progress put there that you can check out. So anyway, once we wrap this up, I'm gonna probably take what I learned here and do a marathon session on the other side. Maybe we'll run cameras on that and just get a quick upload, but we're getting at a really good stage where we're pretty much done with this left-hand side. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and wrap up today, and like always, we'll keep you updated on our Spitfire project, so definitely subscribe if you wanna keep up. And as we go along, we'll have video on this and other projects here on Vortex Garage.